get a lot of questions about how the fuel transfers with this system. It's very basic, no pumps required, no priming. What happens in this main fuel tank, when we have the fuel pump running, it's pulling the fuel out of here, and that fuel needs to be replaced with something, and normally that's air, and that goes through the vent hose here, either the charcoal canister or just to atmosphere. So by plugging this hose into the Camel Tank feed line on the bottom here, when this starts to drop and create suction, creates vacuum, that goes through the hose here and starts to pull the fuel out of here to replace the fuel that's dropping in the main tank. So what happens is the Camel Tank will empty first, and your fuel gauge will read full for about 25% longer than it normally does. Something very interesting that happens with this though is, as we all know, these bikes, if you ride one, you know how hot these bikes run. And with the motor underneath the fuel tank, you come out to your garage and your bike is sitting here. You start the bike and you have a stove element essentially underneath the fuel tank. As it heats up, the fuel expands and the level actually starts to rise. So what we get is air leaving the main tank through the breather, and it'll blow bubbles in the Camel Tank for a long time. If you're riding at slow speed, you're riding in traffic, rush hour traffic, you can ride for an hour before this gets to a point where it's not going to get any hotter and the level starts to drop. So if you open your main cap on the Camel Tank and it's blowing bubbles, that's what's happening. It's not anything you need to be concerned about. When you stop and turn the bike off and things start to cool, again, that can take quite some time for that temperature to equalize and start to drop. But when this starts to condense, again, we create vacuum here and it'll draw the fuel out of the Camel Tank. So if you're out riding, you ride around for 10 minutes and then you come back and you pop the cap on the Camel Tank to see whether it's working. It doesn't have enough time to do anything yet. You need to kind of look at it as a long-term thing, not long-term, but over the course of the tank of fuel. Don't expect to start transferring instantly as soon as you start riding. If you do have any issues where it's not transferring properly, the only things you really need to look at are vacuum leaks. You want to make sure that you do have the hose clamps here. You want to make sure that that one is tight. And there's always the possibility that you've got some crud in the tank and it's plugged the fitting, or it's plugged the fitting up here. That's very rare. The other thing would be if you have a dirty sealing seat in the main tank here, or I'll get emails sometimes where people will have forgot to clip this down all the way. So if you don't have the cap totally closed, you're going to lose vacuum there and you're not going to pull fuel properly. Just have a quick look at that stuff, and that's all I have for you today.